My name is Irma Claire Matthews. I am 63 years old and have lived since I was 20 in a small congregation in St. Augustine, Florida, the oldest city in the United States. My life was simple, dedicated to prayer, caring for the needy, and the vows I made with sincerity, poverty, chastity, and obedience. I deeply believed in the church's mission. Until the day everything changed. It was a rainy spring morning. I was driving alone towards a neighboring convent to deliver medicine and food to an elderly nun. I was focused, murmuring the rosary softly, when a truck skidded on the wet asphalt and hit me full on the driver's side. I remember the sound of shattering glass and the light going out as if someone had blown out a candle, and then silence. But I was still conscious, or rather awake, but not in my body. I saw myself there, trapped in the wreckage, but I felt no pain. I floated gently above the scene, as if I had freed myself from something very tight. Around me, everything was enveloped in intense calm, an almost sacred silence. And then I realized I was out of my body. Something was happening. The first thing I felt was peace. It wasn't the absence of pain. It was an absolute presence of love. An indescribable warmth enveloped me, as if the heavens themselves had welcomed me. That's when I noticed a light coming towards me, a living, pulsating light made of consciousness. From it emerged 3 figures, angels, but not like the ones we see in stained glass or paintings. They had no wings or human features. They were made of light and vibration. And even without saying a word, I understood them. They called me by name, not Irma Claire, but Claire with such deep affection that I felt spiritual tears flowing through me. Although my body was motionless, I wanted to ask what was happening. But before my mind could form any thought, one of the entities approached and touched my consciousness with something I can call eternal memory. And in that touch, everything began to change. They told me I was between worlds and that there were things I needed to see. Things that had been hidden from me for a long time. Truths that once revealed would transform me forever. It was then that I realized this experience was not just a crossing. It was a call, an awakening. The transition was immediate. From one moment to the next, I was no longer above the accident. I was in another place, a vast room made of living light. There were no walls as we know them, but there was a sense of space, of welcome. The floor seemed made of golden energy, and the air vibrated with something I can only describe as truth in pure form. The 3 beings of light were still with me. One of them stepped forward and, without moving its mouth, because there was no mouth, spoke directly to my soul. You sought the truth with sincerity, and now it will be revealed. It was as if my consciousness expanded in a second. I felt as if I was being deprogrammed, layers and layers of beliefs, fears, dogmas, being gently removed, as if they were cleansing me so I could see what was beyond. And then, before me, appeared what seemed to be a living panel of images. They were not just visions. They were experiences, each one pulsed with meaning and emotion. I saw the history of the church, not the one I learned in books or catechisms. It was like seeing the spiritual backstage of great events. I saw true saints, pure souls who dedicated their lives to compassion. But I also saw what was never told to me: shady deals, political manipulations, wars waged in the name of God, but guided by a thirst for power. I saw popes who were used as pieces of a larger chess game. And then something inside me froze. One scene stood out among all. I saw the current pope still alive, and realized that his death would bring a collapse within the church's structure. An uncontrollable revelation would come to light, as if the heavens were waiting for this moment to open the veils. His death will open the gates of truth. What was hidden will be exposed. The lies will fall one by one. Said the beings of light, "You, Claire, will see it first. And you can choose what to do with it." I felt a mix of despair and liberation. It was as if the house I had lived was collapsing. And at the same time, I was finally getting to know the world outside the walls. But why? I asked, crying with my heart. Because the time has come. And because you always sought with a sincere heart. The room then began to transform. The light vibrated differently. What I was about to see was even more shocking, and would completely break everything I thought I knew about God, good, evil, and the church's mission itself. The light began to pulse more intensely, and I felt something like a spiritual vertigo. It was as if my soul was being prepared for a truth that required strength to be absorbed. The beings of light were silent now, as if what I was about to see could only be understood in the deepest intimacy of the soul. It was then that the environment dissolved again, and before me appeared a gigantic structure, similar to a palace, but made of shadow. It was a symbolic image, but understandable. It was the hidden heart of the institution I had served all my life. The facade was golden, but worn. But behind it, the corridors were taken by a kind of living darkness, manipulation, greed, fear, and spiritual control. I heard muffled screams, not screams of physical pain, but of trapped consciences, souls that had been deceived by lies, disguised as faith. And I saw how these lies were carefully sewn over the centuries, mixed with truths to make them inseparable. A web of spiritual control that acted in the invisible, influencing minds and hearts with guilt, fear, and submission. And then they showed me the true nature of the plan behind that structure, to keep humanity disconnected from its inner light. The church, at least that hidden facet, did not guide souls to divinity, but distanced them from their spiritual autonomy. And this was not just a human error. It was a project. True spirituality is within each soul. It is free, infinite, and self-sufficient. But over time, men with a thirst for power decided to hijack access to divinity. They created intermediaries, dogmas, eternal punishments, all to keep the flock under control. Hearing that was like feeling my soul crack. Everything I believed in, every mass, every confession, every host, now trembled before that revelation. I trembled. You did not err by believing, Claire. You erred by giving up your power. But now it will be returned. I then saw images of other spiritual leaders from various traditions. Some had also fallen into similar traps. But amid the chaos, I also saw souls awakening. In every corner of the world, ordinary people having experiences like mine, breaking the veils, seeking a direct connection with the source. And one last image cut me inside. I saw the Pope's funeral, thousands weeping. But behind the scenes, secret files were exposed, documents burned, people in panic. The farce would come to light, and the world would never be the same. You will return, Claire, and you will need to decide if you will tell what you saw. At that moment, I felt I was being pulled back. The light was moving away. The energetic floor disappeared, and a sudden pain invaded me. The pain of returning to the flesh. The first sensation was suffocating, as if I were trying to breathe underwater. A deafening buzz surrounded me, and my limbs felt as if they were tied to stones. Gradually, I began to hear voices, beeps, machines. I was back. I opened my eyes slowly, and cold hospital lights blinded me for a moment. I felt tubes in my nose, something attached to my arm, and a dull pain, piercing the left side of my body. A doctor and a nurse noticed I was waking up, and hurried to examine me. I heard words like miracle, trauma, successful resuscitation. They told me I had been clinically dead for 2 minutes and 39 seconds, but I knew. They were not just minutes, they were eternities. The memories of the experience were vivid, burning inside me like lit embers. And the more I remembered, the harder it was to reconcile what I had seen with the reality around me. I was back on Earth, But I was another person. Something had changed profoundly. In the following days, the nuns from the convent came to visit me. Some prayed by my side. Others cried relieved that I had survived. But I felt strange among them, as if now I knew a secret that no one else saw. The worst was not the silence. It was the conflict within me. How to tell the truth about something that goes against everything you defended your whole life. How to tell people that the church to which you devoted your soul hides something dark. How to say that the Pope, the highest symbol of the faith that sustained billions, was about to die, and that his death would bring to light something that the whole world would need to face. I cried alone at night, not out of fear, but out of mourning. Mourning for the faith as I knew it. The faith with blindfolded eyes. The faith that said, "Obey, even if you don't understand." Now I understood. And the responsibility of carrying this understanding was a weight and a liberation at the same time. I began to write everything I remembered, pages and pages in a notebook hidden inside my dresser. I wrote about the angels, about the room of light, about the secrets, about the structure of shadows and spiritual manipulation. I wrote everything as an outburst, as a final confession. I didn't know if anyone would believe it, but I needed to record it. What disturbed me most was the feeling of urgency, as if time was running out, as if the day of the Pope's death was near, and with it, an explosion of truths that would change the world. I wondered, what if I am the only one to know this before it happens? What if it is my role to say? What if this is the real reason I came back? I was alive, but I would never be the same. After a few weeks, I was discharged from the hospital and returned to the convent. I was welcomed with prayers, smiles, and hugs. To the sisters, I was a miracle. To me, I was a ticking time bomb. I carried within me something that no one there could imagine. Before continuing, just one request. Subscribe to the channel. Before we continue, just one request. Please subscribe to our channel. It really helps us keep going. This helps us a lot to continue. And every gesture of celebration wounded me like an invisible knife. In the early days, I tried to keep silent. I thought maybe it was all just a delusion caused by clinical death. But the more I tried to forget, the more that inner voice spoke again. It wasn't an ordinary voice. It was a presence within me, serene and firm, reminding me, "Did you see? Do you know? Now you need to choose." I began to notice signs, vivid dreams of the Pope in silence, surrounded by smoke, news on TV about his health, small scandals hushed by the media, discreet movements in the Vatican. Everything seemed to conspire to confirm what I already knew. The time was near. One night I went to the empty chapel and knelt before the crucifix. I looked at Christ's face and felt a mix of love and anger. How could he allow his name to be used for manipulation? How could he let sincere hearts like mine be deceived for so long? "Lord, what do you want from me?" "Now," I whispered with tears. And for the first time the silence answered clearly. A sensation took over me, as if every cell in my body vibrated the same message. Tell the truth, even if no one believes, even if they lose faith in you, even if you lose everything. Fear gripped my stomach. I knew what it meant. Telling my experience would be a scandal. I could be expelled from the congregation, ridiculed, accused of heresy, contradicted by theologians and priests. But I also understood something deeper. It was exactly what the dark structure feared, that someone from within would speak out, that someone would leave the cave and describe the light. I then began to secretly record audios, documenting my testimony in detail. Each recording was made during the early hours, hidden in the library. I separated names, dates, messages, kept digital copies in safe places, as if building an invisible dossier for the day everything came to light. In my heart, a certainty grew. When the Pope died, the world would hear. And maybe, just maybe, my words could help prepare some hearts for what was to come. But there was still more to be shown. I felt that experience wasn't over. Something inside me was still opening. Something that would take me even deeper. It was one early morning, while finishing recording another of my audios, that I felt that subtle presence again. The same sensation that enveloped me in the beyond. Warmth, light, vibration. But now, inside my simple cell in the convent, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Suddenly, I found myself out of my body again. This time, I wasn't taken to the room of light. I was led through a kind of golden tunnel, but what was on the other side was surprisingly earthly. A large archive, endless shelves with books, documents, ancient scrolls, computers, and even artifacts from other eras. A place out of time, but full of human history. The presence beside me, now just a luminous consciousness, told me, this is the library of truth. Here are the memories of Earth that were never allowed to humanity. My spiritual eyes scanned the space, and like in a lucid dream, I was guided to a specific section, religions and the control of the spirit. Upon touching one of the books, the words not only jumped off the pages, they merged with my being. Ancient vicissitudes, religious councils altering sacred texts to shape ideologies. I realized how dogmas were deliberately inserted to limit people's inner freedom, original guilt, fear of hell, the separation between the human and the divine. And once again I saw the Vatican, saw secrets hidden in underground chambers, spiritual artifacts, confiscated writings that contradicted the current Gospels, all buried to preserve the dominance of the official narrative. But what shocked me was seeing how all this was about to collapse. The book I held began to dissolve into light, and I heard a phrase with total clarity. After the Pope's death, the foundations will crumble. What was hidden will come to light, not out of revenge, but for divine justice. And you, Claire, were chosen to open the first crack. My consciousness was taken by a whirlwind of emotions. I was nobody, just a simple non-cloistered. How could I bear this weight? But in that place, I realized that the world will not be saved by great names, but by small hearts willing to the truth. Back in my body, I woke up crying. The clock read 3:33 in the morning. My breathing was labored, but my spirit serene. Now I knew. It wasn't a choice. It was a mission. The next morning, I opened an envelope and wrote a handwritten letter addressed to an investigative journalist I knew from an interview. Hold. It simply said, "When the Pope is gone, read this aloud. The world will need to hear." I kept the letter along with my notebooks and recordings. The clock of truth had already begun to tick. As the weeks passed, the signs began to intensify. On television, increasingly frequent reports about the Pope's weakened health, rumors of resignation, political tensions within the Vatican. But above all, a global spiritual unrest. People wrote on social media about strange dreams, feelings that something was about to happen. It was as if the collective unconscious already knew. Inside the convent, however, the atmosphere was one of denial. The sisters continued their daily rituals, their prayers, as if everything was in perfect order. But I saw in the eyes of some of them a growing doubt, and it was this doubt that gave me hope. One of the younger sisters, Sister Lucinda, began to observe me more often. One day she discreetly approached me after dinner. "Sister Clara, since you returned from the hospital, you are different. Your eyes, they shine in a strange way, as if you know something no one else knows." I hesitated, but something in her voice told me I could trust her. I took her to my cell, locked the door, and showed her one of the notebooks. When she began to read, her eyes widened. Upon finishing the first page, she looked at me with tears. "My God, this is all real, yes. And it will happen. When the Pope dies, truths that have been buried for centuries will come to light. And it won't be pretty. It will shake the faith of many people, but it is necessary." She hugged me tightly, as if she understood that something much greater was in motion. From that day on, she began to help me in secret, organizing the materials, digitizing excerpts, spreading encrypted copies on the internet as instructions on when and how they should be disclosed. We were no longer alone. Others were awakening in silence in various corners of the world. It was like an invisible network being woven, a resistance of souls committed to the truth. And then, on a cold December morning, I woke up to the news on the radio. From the convent, the Pope was hospitalized in critical condition. I felt a chill. I knew there was no turning back. We gathered notebooks, checked the recordings, ensured everything was safe in the agreed locations. The world was about to enter one of its most delicate moments, and I, a simple nun, was a key piece in a plan much larger than I could comprehend. That same night, I dreamed of the three beings of light. They said nothing. They just looked at me with such deep compassion that I cried upon waking. The end of an era was near. The days became dense like fog. Not because of the convent's routine, which remained unchanged, the prayers, the chants, the moments of silence, but because of something that hovered in the air, like a living prophecy slowly walking in our direction. The news began to change. Of Tom. Broadcasters discreetly mentioned the Pope's delicate health condition. Nothing official, of course, but for those who knew what to look for, the signs were there. Cancelled appearances, rumors of fainting, internal meetings in the Vatican that seemed like silent preparations for something big. Inside me, the urgency only grew. It was as if time was stretching its last threads before breaking. I continued recording everything, reviewing every note, protecting the copies as one protects a sacred treasure. And more than ever, praying, not as before, to a distant God in heaven, but to that living and loving source I met in the light, the source that pulses within all of us. There was one night in particular, marked by an unusual wind that blew strongly through the convent windows. I woke up with the clear feeling that something had moved in the invisible backstage of the world. I got up and went to the empty chapel. And there, in the dark, I heard that inner voice again. It's close, Claire. Prepare yourself. They will try to hide, but they won't succeed. I returned to the cell in silence. I knew what was coming wasn't just a crisis. Religious, it was a collective spiritual birth. And like every birth, it would come with pain, resistance, blood, and liberation. A part of me still wanted to hide, pretend none of this was happening. But it was too late. There was no way to unsee what I saw, nor to unsay what now, burned in my soul like a truth scorched in the bone. The church trembles in silence. The world, unknowingly, approaches an abyss. Or as ready as a soul can be before the end of an era, the atmosphere inside the convent changed. Not officially, of course. The routine remained rigid. The daily prayers, the fasts, the Latin chants, echoing in the cold corridors. But there were exchanged glances in silence, poorly disguised concerns. Some sisters whispered about the Pope's disappearance from the news. Others said it was just spiritual rest, but I knew the walls were creaking inside. Sister Lucinda began visiting me frequently, and together we organized the final package of information. Videos, audios, transcripts of my experience, all encrypted, all saved in safe places. A final copy was sealed in an envelope with a single instruction: open only when the Pope is gone. Just writing those words made my hand tremble, not out of fear of what was to come, but for the weight of the moment approaching. A turning point. On a particularly silent night, I had a lucid dream. I was again in the room of light. The three beings looked at me with tenderness, but without words. They just showed me the image of a huge basilica cracking right in the center like an egg about to break open. From it came a light so intense it blinded. But it was a good, liberating light. A voice whispered, "The truth is like the dawn. It can be delayed, but never prevented. I woke up with tears in my eyes. I knew dawn was near. The world slept, but the sky was already beginning to lighten. The Pope is still alive, and with each passing day, the attention increases, the structure wavers, the questions grow, and the invisible calm spirit prepares to sweep away the dust of the centuries. Now, all I can do is wait, like waiting for a predicted earthquake, feeling the subtle tremors before the great rupture. And I am here, firm, with an open soul and an awakened heart, on the brink of truth. The days have passed slowly, as if time stretches before a great event. The Pope is still alive, but barely appears. He's reclusive, the news says, fragile, silent. I see him often in dreams. His eyes gaze at me, full of a weariness that goes beyond the physical, a weariness of someone who carries too many secrets. Thus, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with a racing heart. The world seems to hold its breath with me. My recordings are ready, my notebooks organized, the copies protected and distributed as we agreed. The letter, sealed, awaits in trustworthy hands. Everything I could do has already been done. But it is difficult to live with the weight of knowing and not being able to shout. I still walk through the convent's halls, praying with the other sisters, smiling, pretending I am just another in the choir. But inside I feel like I carry a lit flame in the middle of a field of dry hay. I am no longer afraid. Fear disappeared in the light. What remains is a strange mix of peace and urgency, as if my role is fulfilled, and now everything depends on a line, thin and of destiny. Sometimes I wonder what will happen to me afterward. Will I be silenced, hunted, forgotten, or will I just be a seed, one among many others that, when falling on the fertile soil of sincere hearts, will bloom when the time comes? No one knows the exact day, but I feel it. It's near, very near. And when it comes, when the bells ring and the newspapers announce the departure of the man who for years was the face of the church, the world will change. Not suddenly, perhaps, but like a crack in an old wall, a small fissure that over time will reveal what has always been hidden behind it. I don't tell this story to be heard. I tell it because I need to. Because the truth, when we touch it with a clean heart, does not leave us in peace until it is shared. Perhaps you who hear me are not ready to believe, and that's okay. I wasn't either. But when the time comes and turns, you will remember these words. The death of one man will bring the rebirth of many souls. Until then I wait. I trust, not in the church, but in the light I found within it.